Hi, it's Phil Stacy, Executive Sports Editor at the Salem News, here for our weekly or bi-weekly sports podcast, Bandied About. A lot to talk about here with the end of the winter sports season having just concluded, at least in our part of the region. We don't have anybody moving on to state championships, unfortunately, either in our Salem News or Gloucester Times readership areas. With me, as always, Assistant Sports Editor Matt Williams, Gloucester Times Sports Editor Nick Giannino, who's going to run us through the podcast today. So take it away, Nick.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, no more teams left in the North Shore Cape Ann area for sports, but we had some nice runs by our winter teams here. And why don't we jump right into the hoops? We had Masconomet falling yesterday in the Final Four of Division Two. You guys were both at that game. I mean, incredible run for the Chieftains. What they win 17 games in a row. Got to their first Final Four in program history and had a lead in that one at halftime. We're looking really good going into the break.
They were, and I really want Willie to talk on this too. I thought he wrote an excellent piece um, on the team culture and how first year head coach Jacob Morales came in and has really flipped the script, so to speak, and gotten kids to buy in. He spent a lot of time talking to us after the game yesterday, but for the game itself, yeah, they were up 14 points at halftime. They were looking great. I mean, they were playing a team that I think had been averaging, I want to say like 87 points a game in their first three tournament games and held them to 18 in the first half. Really aggressive getting out,
And that's
prevent,
Somerset Berkeley for those listening.
yeah,
That was the
sorry,
opponent.
someone said Berkeley. Preventing clear 3-point shots, really owning the paint, passing the ball very smartly, using a lot of the clock on offense, to slow down that Somerset Berkeley attack at the other end. But as Jacob Morales told us afterwards, it's a 32-minute game. You got to go hard for the full 32. And there was a 6-minute stretch to start that third quarter where everything they had worked hard for just fell apart. They lost that 14-point lead. They actually fell behind. They did manage to claw back and tie it up in the fourth quarter, but Somerset Berkeley came down, hit three balls in front of their own bench, same kid on consecutive possessions, and that the same player hit a reverse layup in the lane, like from under the basket, and the Chieftains just couldn't crawl back from that. So you got to give Somerset Berkeley credit for withstanding a really a flurry of Masconomet first half punches, but they came out swinging in the second half. And I get the sense, Willie, I'd like you to talk more on this. I get the sense that Masco will really learn from this. And I believe Coach Morales when he says, we will be back. It's not like, oh, yeah, we're going to be back here. It's like, no, 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 we will be back here.
Well, yeah, I think there's two things there, right? I think basketball wise, they got to learn how to break the trap, right? I mean, I think you guys saw that they had some issues with that in the fourth quarter against Mansfield
Yeah.
Friday night that kind of made things a little scarier than they had to be at the end of that game. And certainly when Somerset Berkeley started doing that immediately to begin the third quarter, I think it was like three turnovers and baskets in a row. And all of a sudden, it's a 8-point game, 6-point game, and now the jitters are coming. A lot of long passes that were intercepted. I mean, it looked like a football game at times. So I think basketball wise, that's really the biggest thing that they'll be working on. I think culture wise though, and I think like, the thing I'll say about Jacob Morales is that his confidence is just contagious. I mean, he is a charismatic guy. He is exactly what a school like Masconomet needed to take this next step. I mean, it reminds me in some ways of what Matt Karakutis did at Beverly. Now, they don't have the same personality. Matt is a little bit more understated, I think, in his confidence and just the way he carries himself. Jacob is a little bit more outward, just very charismatic, a magnetic personality, and he gets those kids to believe, kids that have never won anything, right, as a basketball program for the boys, and he's getting them to believe that they can do it. And all season he's talking about we're gonna win the league. 1997, that was their rallying cry from day one, right? And the fact that he's not afraid, right? I think in this day and age, and Phil, you can attest to this, he sounds like a throwback. He sounds like a Ken Perone, like a Kevin Brown, like these guys that weren't afraid to say, "We're here to win." And after Belichick and the Patriots and the bulletin board material, right? I think so many people are afraid to like say things like that because they don't want the other team to be able to turn around and use it against them, right? And I think that he's just a throwback. I mean, just and his willingness to come out and say, "Yeah, we're here to win and we expect to win." It's contagious and it instills confidence in these guys and it just the energy around the whole thing has just shifted in such a fast fashion that it is just super super impressive.
Yeah,
Not to mention too, Willie, I mean, they had talent. They had
Oh
some good
God, yeah.
players that have been going through the program. Jimmy Farrell running the point. You got Devin O'Brien, knockdown shooter. You got the big guys with Denton. I know Denton had a huge night on the glass in that first half yesterday, and Vela as well has some size. So they were well balanced. Even a guy like Cal Weidman, I thought he did a lot of the little things. Sometimes
Mhm.
didn't always fill up the score sheet, but played defense and dished the rock. So they had depth and they had some balance, and that's not taking anything away from what Morales did. You still gotta get those guys to buy in, and obviously making a run like that is no easy task. 17 in a row. Would they finish the year 21 and 2, 22 and 2? I mean, that's an incredible
21 and 2,
season.
yeah.
So, but I just want to say they did have a lot of talent this year
Oh
too.
God, yeah, no, of course. But the belief, I mean, it's just
Oh
like,
yeah,
and I think like he's really hard on them too. If you watch him coach, he's hard on them, especially on the defensive end. And it's a tough trick in this day and age with the way the kids are to coach them hard and get them to respond to that inspired and not shut down. That's a tightrope to walk, and it's a gift to be able to do that. And he's got it. There's no question about it.
I
yeah,
think, Willie, to speak to that, and I should couch this when I say it. I see that work at schools like St. John's Prep because they have the depth where it's like, if you're not playing hard or you're not going after it, we'll get somebody else that will replace you. I don't think a lot of public schools have that. So it makes it very impressive to me that Jacob can do that because he sets the bar very high for them and he expects them to not only meet but exceed expectations. And credit to the players for reaching that bar and stepping over it this year.
Yeah, they're
And,
capable. I mean,
and,
it's teaching 101, right? You set high expectations and just expect the kids to meet them, and they'll amaze you, you
and we saw
know?
the same thing with Masco football this past fall.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know, I
and
mean,
there's a lot of connection there. The
yeah.
staffs are very close. Jacob, obviously, college basketball player, but he played football for Central Catholic too, so he brings that mentality a little bit. And there's connections there. Lacrosse and baseball will hopefully continue that for the boys at Masco. But certainly when seems to be big things coming up there for sure.
we get the Sheehan and Morales Teaching Academy going up in the Tri-Town area for budding high school prospects.
Something like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Morales, what? He was an AAU guy before this, right? I know he's been around the block in terms of his basketball knowledge. Still a young guy, obviously, but this is really his first head coaching job in high school, if I'm correct there.
Yeah, he talked about coaching Devin O'Brien for what, sixth, seventh, eighth grade,
Right.
Willie, I think he said.
Yeah,
Knew
yeah,
what
and
kind of play he was, knew the work he put in the gym.
he
Uh,
he did coach a Cathedral for a season
Okay.
in the heights, but obviously lower division, kind of working his way up. He works at Austin Prep as his day job, so the commute down to Cathedral was certainly not appealing.
Okay.
As opposed to Masco from Austin is pretty quick, pretty easy.
Nick, you had a nice run down your area for a team that really, I think, exceeded expectations in the postseason, sub 500 regular season record. But Rockport wins a pair of games, including one out in what, Granby, to
Yeah.
reach the Elite Eight.
Yeah, no, incredible. I mean, if you would have told me this team from Rockport would make it further than last year's team, I would have thought you were nuts. I mean, that team last year was 13-7, I think, in the regular season, or 12-8, something like that. And they had a couple senior leaders on that team that were really carrying the load. Ed Mertz and Brooks Slingloff, and they ended up getting bounced in the Sweet 16. Close matchup in Drury last year, another talented team in the Division 5 bracket, but they come back this year. Josiah Whitley becomes 1,000-point scorer. He's doing a lot for them. They just had a great starting lineup this year. I think Ange Kataria really came around. A junior wing there was hitting some big threes, and they kind of just strung it all together at the right time. I mean, this is a team that, like I said, went 7-13. They lost 9 out of 10 games at one point. You had that whole thing with their head coach getting suspended for a few games. It was tough to get the group back. It was a weird stretch there, I should say, in the middle of the season. And they got hot at the right time. They won 2 out of their last 3 games. They went down to Hamilton Wenham in their regular season finale, a really good team this year in the Cape Ann League, and took them to the brink, ended up losing by 2 points. And speaking with Coach Whitley after that one, he was, obviously disappointed with the loss, but happy with the way his team was coming together and peaking kind of at the right time going into the playoffs. And then, like you mentioned, Phil, they go on the road, 2 long bus rides out to Western Mass. They take down Lehigh in round one. They take down Granby in round two. I think Phil Whitley said they spent about 13 hours on the bus for those first 2 games. And that second team, Granby, was a number 3 seed in the bracket, a really good team, and they got the best of them and punch
A
a
lot of
ticket to the
times
Elite
watching
Eight.
Hoosiers on the bus and back, huh?
Yeah, right, right. They did get a coach bus, I think, for the second one, so that was a nice coup. But then they get to the Elite Eight. They got to go out to Westport, which wasn't quite as bad as a drive, but still out there. And Westport was a team that had a kid who had scored 1,500 career points already. He had scored over 30 points in 9 straight games, and they shut him down. He didn't score in the first half. He got into foul trouble. He couldn't get his shot going. I think he only finished with 7 points. But his younger brother got hot, and it wasn't really necessarily a guy that they had expected to do that in that magnitude. Knocked down 6 threes in the opening half, finished with 7 threes, 23 points. And really, that was the difference. I mean, this kid got hot. They built a 16-point lead in their home gym, and Rockport was just never able to climb back in it. They battled right till the end. I think they ended up losing by 13 points. Cut it close to 10 a couple times in the second half, but just ran out of time. I mean, that was a matchup I thought, if they play them 10 times, they might win 5 of them. It could have gone either way. And obviously having the home court helps. The crowd was behind them. It was a good crowd over there at Westport, which was a nice school, beautiful gym. But doesn't take anything away from their run. I mean, 13 points away from advancing to the Final Four for a small school like Rockport. Pretty incredible. And just to add on that, I think playing in the Cape Ann League for them can be tough at times during the regular season. They're gonna, face their fair share of blowouts to the Manchester Essex, the Newburyports, Hamilton Wenham sometimes. Obviously, they had a good one against them, but it really gets them battle tested for the playoffs because once they get to the playoffs, they're in Division 5, the smallest division in the bracket, in the draw, and they face teams that they're more capable of competing with. And they went 7-13. They were the number 19 seed. So obviously they got rewarded for their strength of schedule. And yeah, just an incredible run. It was fun to watch them. They really came together. That big man Elliot Lyman started playing some really good basketball. Chase Wheat was another guy that came in and did some nice things. Pat Reardon was kind of their energizer bunny, did a little bit of everything. So we only played about 6, 7 guys on a nightly basis, and still able to get to that point. So quite the run for Rockport. Got to be their best season ever in terms of postseason success under Whitley, and certainly the best since the 1990s, I would say, for the Rockport boys hoop program.
Those are really the only 2 basketball teams that either of our regions had that made sustained runs. Am I forgetting anybody that reached the round of 8? I don't think so.
No, I had Manchester lose in the second round. They had a tough draw. Gloucester, I should mention Gloucester. They had a great little run of themselves, winning a playoff game and nearly upsetting Taconic in the second round there. That was a team that really came together at the end of the season too. But yeah, nobody else went to the Elite Eight. I mean, you guys had teams, some other talented teams, facing tough draws, right? I mean, Division 1 is always a gauntlet. Beverly had a nice season in the NEC, but wasn't able to get much done in that tournament. And who else? I mean, you had Bishop Fenwick girls. Would they get to the Sweet 16 as well?
Yeah, they had to play Medfield in the second round, top seeded Medfield.
Right.
Willie, you were down at that game.
Oh, yeah, don't remind me.
So
Tough,
yeah,
tough to watch, man. Maybe
who
I
would
don't
have
know.
thunk
Maybe,
at the beginning of the year, Masco and Rockport would have the two deepest runs, right?
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think Masco. We kind of had a feeling. I
We
didn't think
did.
they'd be, because they were very good last year, right? If you remember, they were the only
Yeah.
team that beat Peabody. We could see the wave coming, but you
Well,
know,
when I saw them beat Gloucester by about 30 points this year, and Gloucester was playing some good basketball at that time, I said, this is a team that can get to the Final Four.
well, yeah, I mean,
And
I didn't think they'd go 22. I mean, I thought they'd be, a contender for the NEC title. I didn't think they'd run the table and go 22-1 or
right,
21
right.
and 2 or whatever it was. I mean, and the crazy thing is, like, all season long, right? They had one loss. They were in the top 10 in the power rankings. I don't think they ever entered the top 20 rankings for the Globe of the Herald. I don't think there was like a lot of respect there. I don't think anybody thought they were going to beat Mansfield and get to the Final Four. I think most people thought they'd be a one win and done, a Sweet 16 team. So, for them to kind of get to the Final Four and prove that that record was no fluke is a nice feather in their cap.
I'm trying
Not
to
not
remember,
just
Willie, the one loss they had. And I want to say it was Winchester, right?
It was in the Winchester tournament. It was in the championship of that. I don't know for sure if it was in fact Winchester, but it was in that tournament. What was it?
Bigelow.
The Bob Bigelow, I think, or Bam Bam Bigelow or something like that.
and not necessarily directly in our area, but a Cal team, Georgetown. They're going to the state championship in Division
Well,
One.
Yeah.
that's the crazy thing, right? Because they were third place in the league behind Hamilton and Manchester, right? And
Yeah,
then they outlast the both of them. So good for
crazy.
the Royals.
And some really close games. I think they hung on by the skin of their teeth in the Elite Eight by 1 point, and then go out. What was it yesterday, and take a game by 3 points. So, yeah, that team obviously, they get some newcomers from various towns, but they've been impressive. And I saw them play Manchester twice this year. They split those games, and they're talented, especially in Division Four. Not super surprising to see them make that kind of run. So we want to touch on any more state tournament stuff, any hockey stuff. Phil, we saw St. John's Prep go down
Yeah, I mean, we had
late
three
there.
teams reach the Elite Eight
Marblehead as well, and who was the third?
and Essex Tech.
And Essex Tech.
Yeah, I'll let Willie talk on Essex Tech since he was at that state quarterfinal game, but I can talk on the other two. Do you want one in particular to go first?
Go ahead, Willie.
It's just, I mean, nice season for the Tech. I mean, to win the Cape Ann League, that's pretty cool. Winnable game against Medfield, but wasn't meant to be. It was one of those classic hockey games where you get a million scoring chances in the first period and you don't convert, and you start wondering, is things going to tilt the other way? And unfortunately, that's what happened in the third period. But it doesn't take away from a great season. And of course, Medfield, the number two seed, handled Bedford in the next round anyway. So maybe I mean, Essex Tech, they wanted to go to the Garden, right? And they had a great senior class that was capable of doing it, but. As things turned out, maybe you saved yourself a drive down to Framingham. If Medfield was going to be head and shoulders above both teams anyway, right? I mean, that's probably little consolation to the Hawks who love this game and have been playing it since they were 5 years old. But with the benefit of hindsight, perhaps that's something that will make them feel better. But I thought they were very impressive, and I'll say this on the show, and I said it to Mark Leonard after the game. Just watching his first line with his son and Vargas and Vicente, the thing that really impressed me was those guys were kind of like a manifestation on ice of the way that I think of Lenny's brand of hockey. And what I mean by that is the crisp breakouts, the quick breakouts, but then the creativity, the backhanded pass that goes right to the tape. Just knowing where each other's going to be as if they have eyes in the back of their head. And when I think back of all the Lenny teams over the years, right? They're really the types of teams that are creative offensively, not afraid to take chances. It's that old Mighty Ducks line of like, not too careless, but not too careful either, right? And I just think it was really cool that it was literally his kids that really brought to life his vision of what hockey should be, like in a way that really we hadn't seen since the Three Amigos line, way back when at Peabody in 2010. So I just thought that was really cool to watch and to see those guys up close. I mean, you hear about them. You see the point totals, right? But not all point totals are created equal. And to actually watch the passing and the way the puck ping ponged around between those guys, was pretty cool. I was glad that I got to see it in person at least one time. And it's just too bad that they couldn't squeeze one in. Something else I said to Phil. Of course, Bedford was coached by our old friend Brian Seabury.
Yep.
And when he used to coach the Beverly girls hockey teams, his teams were a lot like Lenny's teams in the sense that they were top heavy, great first line, great puck movement, eyes in the back of your head stuff. And I can remember so many state quarterfinal girls hockey games where Beverly would come out and outshoot the other team in the first period, but not be able to score and kind of lose the game in the exact same script that his Bedford boys are now winning games. So I thought that was kind of an ironic twist to the whole thing as well.
You should mention too what you were telling me about who you saw at the game, to
Oh yeah, that's
support
funny
them.
too. Yeah, yeah. So Kristen McCarthy, the Beverly girls hockey coach, and her friend and one of her assistants, Anna, who played for Brian. They came out to see him, and I just thought that was really cool. I mean, when you as a coach make enough of an impact that your players from 10 years ago are coming back to watch you, and not just watch you, but watch you at a different school, right? I mean, it's one thing when like the Marblehead football players come back to watch Marblehead and Coach Rudloff because that's their alma mater, right? Kristen and Anna didn't play for Bedford, right? They just there to see their coach. So I think that adds like a whole layer of loyalty to the whole thing and just shows you the impact that these coaches can have on their players, and it just reminds you what we're all here for, right? Is to raise student athletes, right? Not just play the games.
Great point. Great point.
What
Hey, you
what do
want
you
to touch
think,
on
Phil?
go ahead.
What do you think of St. John's of Shrewsbury here? I mean, this is like a huge surprise in some ways
Yeah, it
for them
is.
to be in the finals. I know they played a
Yeah.
really tight game with St. John's Prep. Does it surprise you that Arlington, after beating St. John's Prep, then lost the next game to what I think a lot of people would consider like a somewhat inferior team? Maybe they got a little bit too high because they beat the Prep. Maybe their luck ran out because they had a lot of like close overtime type games. I certainly, of all the teams on St. John's side of the bracket, would not have picked Shrewsbury to be the one in the final.
No, 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 no. Neither would I. I mean, I know St. John's beat them, I want to say 4-2 and 5-4 during the season. So they were close games, but I would have never thought that they would come out of that bracket as the team still standing and playing for the state title. But that's hockey. I mean, there's really no sure path to the final. I mean, yes, two of the last 3 years when St. John's Prep was the number one seed, they ended up winning the whole thing. But last year they played, what was Winchester, the 10 seed, 11 seed? So things can happen. And I think there's probably a lot of truth to what you said. It was such an emotional high for Arlington to beat St. John's in that round of eight. Double overtime. Prep scores with 17 seconds left in regulation. Brandon Ward, one-timer from the Pasternak slot, off-wing circle. Goalie pulled. Prep had dominated the third period. They're still trailing 1-0. They get that goal. All the momentum changes to them. They dominate the first overtime period. They can't score. They're controlling the second overtime, 3-on-3. And then Arlington gets a breakout, 2-on-1, shot, follow-up, rebound, goal. And Arlington poured everything into that game. So yeah, maybe there was some residual runoff from that emotional win that just couldn't carry over into Shrewsbury. And I'm sure Shrewsbury's playing with house money. Like we don't expect them to be there. I'm sure not a lot of other people expect them to be there too. I don't have the Catholic Conference standings in front of me, but I believe they were ahead of only Malden Catholic in the standings. Certainly St. John's, Catholic Memorial, Xaverian and I think BC High were all ahead of them.
I think that's, I mean, they certainly were in if the power rankings are any indication of that. Now, did CM and the prep, did they end up sharing the Catholic Conference, or was the prep a point ahead?
They were a point ahead because CM tied a game late when a win would have given them a co-title, but they
Okay, I
tied.
wasn't sure because I know the prep had, clinched at Zavarian, but then I wasn't sure about if that game out at West Point was a.
No, no, it had been decided by then.
So I think it's interesting too. I mean, assuming that CM wins the state title, which I think, we would all bet on that. And, no disrespect to Shrewsbury. We hope it's a great game. We'll be watching, if it's on TV or whatever. But I think there's like perhaps a little bit of an NFL MVP curse here, like that streak where the NFL MVP kept losing in the Super Bowl. It's like, it seems like the second place team in the Catholic Conference is destined to perhaps win the state title. For years and years, the Prep had what, two state titles and no Catholic Conference titles. And, now they're racking up the Catholic Conference titles, but only last year did they get them at the same time. So I think that's kind of an interesting little hobgoblin there where it seems like the second place team is having more luck in the state tournament in recent years.
Well, I do know that Catholic Memorial beat St. John's Shrewsbury twice during the regular season, 3-1 and 4-2. So again, you're St. John's Shrewsbury. What do you got to lose? You know your opponent. I mean, Catholic Memorial has been given like a shot of B12 here since they put this eighth grade goalie in net. He's been fantastic for them. I mean, led them to the state final. As you said, they're favorites on Sunday at the Garden. But, would it really be that shocking to see St. John's or Shrewsbury? I mean, it would be surprising. I wouldn't say shocking. And again, that's part of what makes hockey great. Getting back to St. John's, I know it was a devastating loss for the players and the coaches and their families, as any postseason loss is when you have grand dreams or hopes of winning a championship. In hindsight, I actually think it was a pretty good year for St. John's Prep.
Oh, great
Not
year.
not the greatest year, but a really good year considering this team was 2-3 after losing to Reading on New Year's Day. They were floundering. They didn't have any offensive flow. They had some questions on defense. It just seemed like the turnover from the previous year was going to be too great to overcome. And together they got their act together. They went on a great little run. I think they won 9 out of 10 at one point, and seeded second in the state. And yeah, they lost in the quarterfinals, which to them it's like if you don't win the title, it's a disappointing year. I get it, but it's not like this is the first time Arlington has defeated them in the state tournament. They've had a ton of trouble with Arlington over the years, dating back to the 60s when it comes to the postseason. And I think the lack of a true bona fide scorer, although I mean, you could say Brandon Ward scored 18 goals, that he was clearly their top marksman, but they didn't have that one guy that they could really like get on his back and just say, like, we go out, we need a goal right now. And he would go out and get it. And not a lot of teams have that at this level. So I think, that might have been missing from their arsenal, but all things considered, pretty good year for St. John's. I mean, yeah, goalies stopped more than 93% of the shots they faced. They won the Catholic Conference, Willie, as you alluded to, for a second straight year. They developed that cohesion. They got through two rounds of the tournament. I mean, they're it's a lot of what we always say. They're always everybody's target because they're A, St. John's Prep, B, defending state champions, and C, with the schedule they play, they don't have too many cupcakes, if any, very few. So, all things considered, I think a decent season for them.
Oh, I mean, I think on anybody's list, right? Chris Hansen would be in the top, what, three, maybe four coaches in boys hockey in North Shore history. Is that fair to say?
Oh, I would go higher than that. Yeah.
I'm just trying to be polite, but yeah, I mean, he's probably number one for me, but that's a conversation for the summertime. But my point is, and he's won what, three league titles?
Yeah.
And this is one of them. So that to me, that means it's a great year.
Well, we talk, we've alluded to this before, but I think it bears repeating. I think from the outside, many people feel like, well, yeah, of course, they have an all-star team. Every year they should be playing for a state title. And theoretically, that's true. But you're taking all these personalities, all these kids who have been the absolute best players at whatever, whether it's a town team or elite team or, a club or whatever, and they're coming in and all of a sudden it's like you're being asked to be a third line checker. And not a lot of kids can buy into that. And they demand, as we, kind of circle back to what you were talking about with Jacob Morales, they expect a ton out of these kids. They put very, very high expectations on them. I know not everybody does, but it's a program designed to get kids ready to play college hockey or junior hockey or PG hockey, whatever it is. So the expectations are great, and the players have to lean on each other to help raise that greatness. I think coaching over there, when a lot of people see it as easy, and oh yeah, well, one guy gets injured, they just put the next all-star in the lineup. Like it doesn't work that way. And I think what they do over there, I actually feel like this was one of the best coaching jobs they've done this season to get this team refocused and back on track, knowing that, geez, we have a losing record on the first day of January, and we haven't even begun our Catholic Conference schedule in earnest. Well, the toughest is far yet to come for us, and they managed to turn it around and get things done. So, yeah, I think there's a reason why it's not just all the wins and the state titles and things like that make Chris Hansen and as an extension, his assistants, the three guys that have been there with him since day one at St. John's, Dave Hennessy, Jeff Taché, and Scott Hentosh. I think there's a reason why they're always successful, and it's in the way they do things. It's how they approach the game, and it's what they expect from their teams and get them to reach that point.
Yeah, I mean the ice time doesn't hurt, and there certainly are many, 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 many advantages. But when
Yeah,
we talk about the Catholic Conference, the teams that we're measuring them against have all that stuff too. So
yeah,
that's really beside the point.
yeah.
Um,
I think it's a wash there. You're right. And we would be remiss if we didn't mention our friends over in Marblehead, which, like St. John's, were the defending state champions. And in the Headers case, it was Division Three. And, really good season, won the Northeastern Conference, hit a roadblock, some guys out of the lineup late in the regular season. They dropped a few games, probably a lower seed than they had hoped going in at eight. I mean, they were up at three at one point during the month of February. So as a result of that, they end up meeting Nauset in the quarterfinals. Now they upset Nauset in the state final last year, a game that I think even head coach Mark Marfione would say, if last year's team played last year's Nauset team 10 times, Nauset wins nine times. Well, the day they played them at the Garden last St. Patrick's Day, that was the one time that they were destined to beat them, and they did. They beat them 1-0. I think Nauset is on a mission this year. They are undefeated. They have a kid with over 50 goals in like 24 games, which is crazy at this level, in this day and age, anyway. They just have a stacked offense. They have loads of depth. They have a really strong defense, very good goalie. I threw something out after seeing them last week and I really believe this. I think, and I took a little blowback, and that's fine, but um, I said I think they could hang with most Division One teams, good Division One teams. Now that doesn't necessarily mean beat them or beat them regularly or have a ton of success in the Division One tournament. I'm not saying those things. I'm just saying I think they could hang with those teams because of the talent this particular group of kids have on this team. So Marblehead has to get down to Cape Cod to play them in the quarterfinals last week. And by the way, unbelievable atmosphere down in Bourne. Were you ever down there, Willie, in your hockey travels?
well, no. I mean, and it's silly but no.
Never seen not a high school game, but your daughter's team or anything like that play down
Yeah, no. And if they were scheduled there, we'd be skipping it.
there? Okay. Well, great rink, unbelievable rink, actually. I wish we had something like that up here. It really, was fantastic. But Marblehead played a terrific game. They get an early goal, like 2 minutes in from their captain, Kyle Hart. They lock it down defensively. They played structurally sound. They were committed to defense. When they were in trouble, they dumped the puck. They made quick line changes. They made smart passes. They didn't make, they were very physical, but they weren't, physical in the sense that they were dirty. They weren't late hits. They weren't, stick fouls or anything. Nauset ties it early in the second. Marblehead doesn't panic. It's 1-1 midway through the third before finally Nauset gets on track. Boom, 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 boom. 5-1 final. Not really indicative of how the game was played. I think we're going to see ultimately that that'll be Nauset's most difficult game of the postseason. I mean, they do play number two Medfield in the finals on Sunday. But I think we're really going to see when the smoke clears that Marblehead will have given them their toughest game of the year. Tons of credit to those Marblehead guys. Not as strong as last year's team, not as much firepower. Defense probably a tick down. Although I love the game that Sean Dolan played this year for Marblehead. I thought he was excellent. One of the best players in the region in terms of raising his game one year to the next. I was blown away by how much he contributed to this Marblehead team this year. But really a wonderful season for them. So while it's disappointing we don't have any teams playing at the Garden on Sunday, I think we had in the three that we just mentioned, Essex Tech, St. John's, and Marblehead, three really good stories of hockey success this year that didn't end up in a championship or the opportunity to play for one, but still terrific seasons for all three of those teams.
All right, I think that pretty much covers the past couple weeks here in the North Shore winter sports scene in the tournament. We don't probably don't have too many details on the spring season yet, but those guys will be getting out to practice next Monday. So a week
Monday.
from
Yeah.
yesterday, and I'm sure we'll touch upon our baseball and lacrosse and what have you in the coming podcasts. But for today, why don't we just jump right to our blind rankings, unless there's anything else you guys want to touch on from the winter season.
I mean, I think we should just mention quickly that we had a little bit of success at the New England Wrestling Championships.
Sure.
Locally, Alex Barojas of St. John's Prep reaches the 285-pound final, where once again he runs into his personal, who would be a wrestling nemesis, Willie, for somebody that just continually beats somebody over and over and over and over.
Uh, Nemesis is probably a good word for it.
I think he meant WWE, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Who would be a
Like
pro
a
wrestler? That would be
Well, I
somebody.
don't, I mean, it's hard because usually you get a lot of 50-50 booking, right? I mean,
Yeah,
most of the time they kind of trade wins back and forth.
yeah. That's what I mean.
It's hard to think of anybody that's kind of like, like this Chelmsford kid is like a super senior or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Barojas is outstanding, but this Thomas Brown kid is
Hey, it's
just
Bajoris, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, correct. Um he just, he's something else. So
Yeah, I mean it's crazy
how many
to
times did he
be
lose to him this year?
I think at
Three?
least three.
three, yeah. Um but they've met something crazy like 9 times over the years or something
Yeah,
like
I think
that.
they've been the top two in the North and Division One for at least 3 years running. I mean, every year it's like a repeat
Yeah.
rematch type of thing, and there's no shame in that, certainly. And the kid's a phenomenal football player too. I don't know what his college plans are.
I think he's going to
Um,
Villanova, I saw for football.
is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
That's pretty legit.
Yeah, that is pretty
Um,
legit.
that is
I mean, if
pretty.
you're a what, 6'3", 285-pound road grader who doesn't get moved and has the wrestler's lower body strength, I mean, that's a pretty good guy to put on your offensive line, I'd say.
Yeah, I don't see anything on his Twitter, but he's definitely going to get offers. That's for sure. Although this could be an old one too. Um,
But I
but
just
yeah,
want to mention that,
tremendous.
Nick. But yeah, go to the
Yeah,
blind.
of course. Um,
What do you got?
all right, let's dive right in. We'll stick with the state tournament theme here, the high school stuff. How about venues to host state championships? And this can be, any sport, any season. I'm just going to give five random ones, and you guys will rank them.
Before you do that, Nick, I just want to say, we complain a lot. People think I complain a lot, whatever. I thought UMass Boston for the game yesterday from Masco was a tremendous venue. I thought that place was rocking.
Yeah,
The parking was easy. I mean, the locker rooms afterwards were a little bit of a cluster. Maybe they could do a little better with that. But as far as watching the game goes, if they had those games there all the time, sign me up. That would be great.
Yeah, I've heard decent things about Worcester State too. I've been there once. It's not bad, not the biggest venue, but pretty good. So
Any of the colleges, right? We
right,
love college, small colleges. We love. I mean, I wish they could do it at Salem State. I know, the Hig probably could use a fresh coat of paint maybe before they start bringing people in, but Salem State would be great too. And obviously, Endicott being private probably costs a few more bucks, but any of the MASCAC schools, tremendous venues to watch high school sports.
yep, yep. So anyway, those were obviously Final Four games. We'll do state championship venues, and again, this can be any sport. So just kind of jump around. And I'll hit you guys with one that was pretty popular when I was in high school. I'm not sure how often it's used anymore, but they used to host a lot of state championships here. The DCU Center in Worcester.
Um, I'll go four. Nice place, probably good location for a lot of schools west of 495.
Sure,
Not as convenient for our friends in this part of the state. A little cavernous too. I mean, that's a big venue for
it is.
a state championship. I am with Willie. I like the smaller venues that you feel like there's a great crowd there and it's packed in. So, yeah, four is good for me.
I'm gonna go two. I'm gonna go two. I like it because you can do hockey there and you can do basketball there. I like the little room they have right off the thing where you can do interviews really easy. And
Sure.
I covered some cool stuff there in my early careers. I saw Swampscott win the state title there, the girls. I covered the AHL All-Star game there and talked to some local guys. So I got good memories there. So I'm gonna put it two.
All right. How about Gillette Stadium? Obviously, primarily football.
I'll go first. That's gonna be five for me. I don't
Yeah.
like it. I don't love Gillette. It's cool for the kids. I think it's probably becoming less cool with Tom Brady out of town and the team sort of not being what it was, right? But at the height of the Patriots dynasty, it was cool for the kids. But it's quiet because you're not going to get 60,000 people in there. I don't like watching the game from a press box that far away for a high school game. It's really difficult to get any players interviewed afterwards. The kids can't even really warm up. They're not allowed to go in the visiting locker room when they come right off because the other teams are coming on. It's such a Bonham and Bailey production trying to get everything to run on time. Herding the kids out like cattle, herding the new kids in. It's really just not my favorite thing. I prefer the intimacy of some of these smaller places.
Bill?
Five for everything Willie just said.
Five as well. Okay. And I probably would agree with that as well. I think it's awesome for the kids, but as a, spectator or a media member, it's not exactly ideal. All right. How about the Tsongas Center in Lowell?
I'll go two there. I like it. Again, it's a little more cavernous than I like, but really clear sidelines for fans' viewing experience. Again, as Willie mentioned with DCU, you can do basketball or hockey there.
Right.
Um, for hockey, the press box, you have a great view of the ice. For basketball, you're right down on the court, which is nice too. Easy access to the locker rooms. They can spread out the fan bases on both sides, so there's no conflicting, rivalries going on within the stands or whatever. And it's a good atmosphere up there. Parking is, but you can't have everything. So yeah, two is good.
Yeah, I'm gonna put it three. All the reasons Phil said, all the reasons about the DCU. I don't like the parking. I think the garage stinks. I think having to
Yep.
pay for the garage when you're already paying for your ticket also stinks. So that's why I'll put the DCU one slot ahead at two and Songus at three.
All right. Let's jump into some baseball. This is a venue that's been used in recent years, also out in Worcester, Polar Park.
I've never been there. That's tough. This is really tough because
Uh,
I've one and four remaining. So it's like, do I take a chance that I'm not gonna like
I'm going
the
to say it's pretty similar to LaLoucher or however you pronounce it in Lowell. So if you want to go that route and use that instead, that's fine.
didn't we go there, Willie, to see one of the Danvers state finals a few years ago?
No, none of those were. Polo Park wasn't even built back then, right?
Oh, I'm thinking of Brockton. Okay.
Oh God, yeah.
Oh,
Oof.
Brockton, yeah.
That's a distant fifth for me. My God,
Yeah.
if I could put number 10, I'd put it down there at Brockton. Oh God, those were not fun times in our lives driving to Brockton
Oh,
every
I
day.
went to Polar when I think did Beverly Salem Legion play out there? Oh no, they were at Holy
That might
Cross.
have been Holy Cross, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, Polar's only been built for what, 2 years, right? Or three when the Woo Sox left Providence. So it's a pretty new place.
Yeah, I guess I'll just go four by default. Haven't been there.
Well, I think you have three, right?
Oh,
Yeah,
do
you
I?
have three. DCU, you had it for.
Yeah, DCU at four.
Yeah.
Okay, so three, sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw it at four. I mean, yeah, I'm gonna take a chance. It's unfortunate the last one's gonna be number one, but I just don't have enough experience to say one way or the other.
All right. Well, the last one I got for you was one that I still think they should use, and it's unfortunate they don't. But TD Garden
Yeah, love it, love it. Got a
Yeah, well,
chance
they
to
do use
cover.
it for hockey. They
for
just
hockey, not for that's what I should say. For hoop, they should still use it.
Yeah, it's awesome for hockey. I mean, again, I would like it to be a little more intimate, but you tend to get the best crowds for the championship games. And, we've had seven, eight, close to 10,000 people for some of the games we've done over the
Yeah.
years there. And it makes for an awesome atmosphere. I think it's so different from Gillette because A, it's not as cavernous, and B, it's an indoor arena that you can feel like the fans are right on top of you. It makes a great atmosphere there. For us in the media, piece of cake, watching from up top, getting down to the locker rooms. Again, I wouldn't recommend paying the park in there, but there's plenty of places around that you can find cheaper options. Lots of food around the area to get. Yeah, that's a clear number one for me.
Yeah, I think so too. I got a chance to cover Marblehead and Salem, played basketball there last year. Tremendous experience. They did a great job with the locker rooms. MIAA with the hockey always does a great job with the scoring, the game sheets, making
Yeah.
sure you get players from both teams. It's
Yeah.
really, I think of all the MIAA state championships over the years, for whatever reason, the hockey has been the best run. You know, soccer is really easy too because you just go right on the field and talk to the kids, and there's no really. But as far as sports that have locker rooms where the kids disappear and then come back, the hockey is the best run, I think, by a wide margin. So I'm happy with that actually, Nick. I would have put the Garden number one, irregardless. So well done.
Great. So I got Bill Garden, Songus, Polar Park, DCU, Gillette. Willie's got Garden, DCU, Songus, Polar Park, Gillette.
Mr. Kraft will not be happy.
That's a
No,
good
yeah,
ranking. That's honest to God. That's exactly how I would have done them if it wasn't blind. So
pretty
that's
good.
that's impressive. Well done, Nick.
Pretty
Do you have
good.
an order, Nick, that you would have done?
I would have TD number one. I'd probably put Songus two. I'd probably put Polar Park three, DCU four, Gillette five.
That's
So
fair.
yeah, what Phil had.
Great minds.
But I think both of those are good lists. I think definitely have TD one and Gillette five, and sandwich the other three in the middle somewhere.
I mean, Songus is shinier. Songus is DCU kind of similar to Salem State. Could use a fresh coat of paint, but like I says, I got some good memories there. So I threw
Yeah,
it a little
totally.
higher on the list than it probably deserves.
All right, sweet. Well, that should be it for this week's Bandied About, right, Phil?
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen, as always. And we can finally close the book on winter. Although I will say, if you're still listening with us here, we'll run final columns on the boys and girls hockey and boys and girls basketball in the coming days, or over the next week, I should say. Get those final stats out, and then finally turn our attention to the spring. So probably it as far as talking about winter on this podcast. Next time we talk to you, we will be into the spring. Gentlemen, I thank you. Nick, thanks for steering the ship today. Willie, thanks as always for your insight. I'm Phil Stacy. Thanks for listening to Bandied About, our Salem News Gloucester Times Sports Podcast.